Okay, thank you for joining us today. So we're going to be going through a MathShed webinar on the 5 counting principles. We are recording the session, so if you know anybody that wants to access it afterwards, or if you want to access anything again, you're more than welcome to go back and watch the recording. It will be emailed to you a few days after, and it will also be on our webinars page on the website. If you've got any questions whilst I'm speaking and going through the content, please feel free to put them in the chat box or the Q&A box. Amanda is here with me today, so she'll be looking after the chat box and things like that. And my name's Amelia. I deliver training for EdShed in spelling, phonics, and we are starting to do training in maths too. So today we're going through the 5 counting principles, and I'll start off, what are they? So the 5 key principles with counting are the one-to-one principle, the stable order principle, the cardinal principle, the abstraction principle, and the order-irrelevance principle. So the first 3 are our how to count, and the last 2 are the what to count of the principles in counting. So these are really important aspects because counting is essential and fundamental for all children to learn in order to be successful mathematicians. It is so important in many areas of life. Mastering this skill can help prevent some misconceptions in the future and create a solid foundation for children to build on so that they can understand all the content that they will come across in schools better. So when do children learn this sort of content? So when do they start to look at the principles? Most children will develop this understanding between the ages of 2 and 4. So majority of children will learn these counting principles before they even get to school. It'll be in nursery and from all the learning with their parents as well. But it is good to check that learners understand these principles as it's so fundamental for their mathematical development. If they haven't got this basis, if there's a gap here, then it could really be to the detriment of everything else that they're going to learn in mathematics. So let's go into the 5 principles in a little bit more depth. The first one is the one-to-one principle. So this is about assigning a single number to each of the objects, counting them one at a time. It's really helpful to get children to move the objects while they're doing this. So as I say, a number name is assigned to that object. So I've done 5 already. On my last one, I'm saying 6 whilst I move that object. Children that are struggling with one-to-one might start to say a random string of numbers as they are counting the object. So if I'm going here 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, while I'm counting them, they're not actually assigning that one number to one object. In MathShed, we've got a few activities that help with this, but you can utilise any counting activity to be checking on children's one-to-one correspondence. So here, can we count the counters onto the plate? If we're doing it one at a time and moving them into their own space, getting the children to move those objects to a distinct place can be really helpful for building that one-to-one correspondence. Day to day, anything you do, you can be counting with children. So make sure you do it as much as you possibly can. You might count children in your class, count them into groups, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So each child has sort of been assigned a number as they're counting. You might do the same with snacks or equipment like puzzles and tennis rackets. All there's just some examples. The next one is the stable order principle. So this is about the children needing to know their number names in the order and that they always go in that order. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And they do also, you can count in the reverse order as well, but there is this one specific order that they go in. If children are struggling with the stable order principle, they might just say numbers in different or random orders or even skip some of the numbers out when they are counting. It might be as extreme as this on the screen, 4, 1, 6, 3, 2, or it might just be simple 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, where they just skip one number out. In MathShed, there's lots of times where we're looking at the numbers in order. So this is one of our examples from reception in the autumn term, step 3, building up one at a time, counting how many numbers are in each of the towers, how many blocks are in each of the towers. but those numbers are treated in order 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We also have lots of singing rhymes included in the suggestions for this lesson, because singing songs about numbers can really help with that. So as an example, 5 currant buns, 5 little ducks, or 5 little speckled frogs. You can also sing lots of number songs that go in that order as well. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Once I Caught a Fish Alive is a really, really great rhyme to get that order in there. You can also use blocks with numbers on, so you can build towers maybe, and making sure the numbers go in the correct order. The next principle, and is the final one of our how to count, is the cardinal principle. So it's knowing how many, that last number that I say is the number that's in the block. So this group of cars that's at the top left here, I can count 1, 2, 3. There are 3 cars. How many cars are there? There are 3. That final number that I said is the cardinal bit. And the bottom group, 1, 2, 3, 4. The number of cars, how many are there, is 4. If children are struggling with the cardinal principle, they may not realise that's how many. They may need to try and remember that final number. If they can't quite get that, they might have to recount the cars. And to be able to get to this point anyway, they need a good understanding of the first 2 principles. So sometimes you get children just say a different number to you or not have that final answer there. In MathShed, we do lots of cardinal practice with counting with numbers and linking them to the pictures, so they can see at the bottom here, those dots link to that number. That is the amount that's with the number. But day to day, you can incorporate it into your lessons by constantly asking how many and emphasising that the final number, there are however many. Here is an example with bears. 1, 2, 3. There are 3 bears. So making sure we add that extra sentence on there. Now, the next bits are the sort of what to count a bit more. The abstraction principle is about anything can be counted. Even non-physical things that can't be touched and picked up. You don't have to be able to move it from one place to another to be able to count it. So yes, earlier we said that's a really helpful skill, but you do need to move on with the abstraction principle so that we understand we can count things like clapping, clicks, or jumps, or other things that we maybe can't see and feel and touch. Children also need to understand that objects in a set can be counted. They might be different sizes, different shapes. So if you ask how many objects are on the screen here, you'd have a different answer to how many cubes are on the screen, for an example. Children that are struggling with abstraction principle, it might be because they rely on touching and moving the objects to count accurately. So they struggle to do that with things like jumps, for example, where they can't physically move one and say, oh, I've counted that one already, because they'd have to do another jump. In MathShed, we might start to use materials that have, say, this example with a group of cubes, but one of the cubes is a different colour. It doesn't mean that we don't count it. And here we've got a crab, and we need to count how many arms and legs and claws the crab has. So even though we're counting different things, the claws and the legs, it is still counting all of that and which bits we are and aren't counting there. And you might see some investigations in MathShed too. So here it's about building tower blocks. Is it possible to build a tower using 9 different blocks that's taller than a tower made from 10 different blocks? Or what about if all the blocks are the same? So having those same and different things to count. Day to day, you can count claps and clicks as much as you can. Count different objects that can't be touched, so maybe things that you can see in your environment, but not physically be able to move. Count objects of different size, object and shape together, and practice counting imaginary objects as well to help them visualize them in their heads. We've also got the order-irrelevance principle. So this is knowing that doesn't matter which way I count them, I've still got the same number of objects. So here I've got 6 objects if I count them left to right. If I go the other way, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, there are still 6. Just because I've gone right to left, it doesn't change how many there are. You can also go randomly, 1, 2, and so on. So we're counting each one in turn, but there are still 6 objects there. Now, children that struggle with the order irrelevance principle might go through all of this of counting each individual object as it comes along, moving it, and then when you ask them how many there are, or when you muddle them up again, they're not really sure how many are there anymore. So they knew there were 6 in the line, but now that you've moved them, they need to try and count them again because they're not in the same order anymore. They've not grasped that order irrelevance principle. Now in MathShed, you might get things where you're working with hands, for example, and it might not always be full hands first and then the final 2 on here. So here we've got 17 shown with the hands, but we've not put it with the 2 that's last. So you can muddle it up and it doesn't matter what order. Even if you swap hands and have the 2 on your left hand and the 5 on your right, it is still going to be the same number. Day to day, make sure you practice counting objects in different ways, so right to left as well as left to right. That can be quite a hard habit to break because we do a lot of reading and we work a lot left to right in reading, but with maths we need to make sure we've got that difference as well. We can go right to left. Count objects and move them around and count them again, showing that they are the same amount. So we get to the point where children know that they are the same amount, even though you've moved them. Now, the 5 principles are really important, but it isn't everything to counting. There's lots of different things that come into understanding counting in depth, and subitising is another one. So subitising is instantly seeing how many of a thing that you have. It comes from a Latin word which means suddenly. So it's being able to recognise the number of objects in a group without counting them. So here, for example, from MathShed, you might see this and how many counters are red. I don't need to count 1, 2. I can see that and say 2. Here I know there are 4 counters. I don't need to count it individually. So children should be able to subitise with small numbers up to approximately 5. And we want that building into their learning as well. But we see it all the time in real world examples. Sometimes you get them in nice arrays, so a box of eggs, 6 eggs, I can see that there are 6 there. Oh, I can see 2 gaps mentally in the bottom picture, so now I know there's 4. I don't need to count how many eggs there are here. I can see the numbers of dots on the dice that are in the bottom right, and I just know what that number is without having to count each individual dot on the dice. In the top right corner here, I've got an example just from our email. So at the top, you get this little menu and you know there are 9 dots from that arrangement. So when you get arrays, it can be a bit easier to subitise and subitise larger numbers when you see them in their arrays. Here I've got the same number of counters, but it's much easier to tell that there are 6 in the picture on the left than it is in the picture on the right when they're in a random arrangement. So those arrangements can make it a little bit easier, but do make sure that you use both. And normally the randomness would come with the smaller numbers. When you're talking about numbers 10 and beyond, you'd probably want arrays. Okay, so that is all about some of the counting principles and a little bit of what's beyond with the subitising. Coming soon, we are going to be introducing MathShed training. So we deliver CPD training in spelling and phonics so far, and we are introducing a new MathShed training for the summer term this year. So it's all going to be about the CPA approach to teaching mathematics. We've got different resources, and we're going to be going through how to utilise those resources that we all have in schools to enable children to learn their maths really well. So it will be based and individualised to the schools that we are delivering it in. We are thinking of focusing on the resources that you have rather than telling you all about how to use resources that you don't have. So if you are interested in this, please keep an eye on our training page on our website. You can see the CPD that we already offer and the costs that are involved with that on there. And if you want to register your interest in MathShed training, please give us an email at training@mathshed.com, and then you can be first on the list for picking your dates. Okay, thank you very much for joining us for our webinar today. If you've got any questions, please just pop them in the chat box and we'll happily answer them.